5, mini presentation number 1 on Chapter 3, the Global Trade Environment, pages 72 to 87. Our outline. First, we'll discuss the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. Next, we'll talk about the World Trade Organization. Then we'll go into the 4 categories of preferential trade agreements, followed by the trade relationship dynamics and NAFTA. Then, talking about the 4 preferential trade agreements in Latin America, their key members. Finally, talking about the preferential trade agreements in the Asia-Pacific region. General Agreements on Tariffs and Trade. What is it? It's a treaty between nations agreed to promote trade within members. They've handled over 300 trade disputes, but they had no enforcement power, so the disputes took a long time to resolve. So it was replaced by the World Trade Organization in 1995. The World Trade Organization is a forum for trade-related negotiations among the members that started in January 1st, 1995, and is based in Switzerland. It has 165 members, and there's representatives from each member nation meet once a year with the goal to improve world trade. They also include a dispute settlement body to resolve complaints with members about unfair trade barriers and other issues. Preferential trade agreements. Their goal are to lower barriers to trade within regions. They can give special treatments to their members and can discriminate against others. And there's over 300 preferential trade agreements. So there's 4 different categories. We have the free trade area, which is the least friendly, then the customs union, next the common market, and then the economic union, which is the most friendly. Specifically, the free trade area abolishes tariffs and internal barriers. The customs union does this, but it also establishes external tariffs. Common market goes one step further, adding free movement of factors of production. And then finally, the economic union does all 3 of those, but also adds the economic and political harmonization.
Okay, so now moving on to trade relationships, we're specifically examining North America. And so this means Canada, the United States, and Mexico. And the 3 of them make up a distinctive regional market. And so what does this mean? Well, they all have something to offer to one another. So the U.S. offers dominating producers, an abundance of natural resources, wealth, geographical space, and a one nation, one state political and economic environment. And then Canada, they have major success in the train, plane, and smartphone manufacturing industries, and Mexico is now known as a leader in manufacturing and specifically thriving in flat screen TV sets. And so whether it's something niche or something broad like the United States, every area has something to offer within these trade relationships. And so what does this mean? Well, U.S. and Canada signed a free trade agreement in 1988, also known as the CFTA, and this led then to more than $650 billion of flow in goods and services, which is the biggest trade relationship between any 2 single nations. And so how this worked was that Canada took 20% of the U.S. exports, and the U.S. buys 85% of Canada's exports. And so this image shows the economic integration of North America. And as you can see, Canada is the #1 trading partner with the US. And so that just shows that the CFTA is in action. And then it goes down the line to China and so on and so forth. And so for the North American Free Trade Agreement, the NAFTA, what is it? Well, as of 1992, a formal agreement between Canada, US, and Mexico. And so we kind of shifted from the CFTA to the NAFTA in 1992, which then became effective from Congress in 1994. And so, free trade versus customs union, this basically means that with the NAFTA, this promotes economic growth, and this leads to then tariff elimination and expanded trade and investment. And so that's what's occurring in the NAFTA and how it's going to benefit Canada, United States, and Mexico. And the result of this NAFTA? Well, the elimination of barriers for goods, services, and investments, along with the patents, trademarks, and copyrights, essentially mean that there's going to be major benefits surrounding businesses, workers, farmers, and consumers. And so, while The CFTA was a great trade agreement. Obviously, adding Mexico just takes it another layer deeper. And so, specifically looking at Mexico and U.S., they had over $500 billion flow of goods. And this means that more than 1 billion goods cross the border each day. And so, however, there still are some issues that occur with discretionary protectionism, and this just means that some goods that are passing between the borders can get stuck in the bottleneck phase where they're stuck at the border, and that's obviously just leading to supply chain issues or manufacturing issues along the way. But overall, the NAFTA was a great trade agreement, and as you can see in the image to the right, that by combining all of the resources, money, population, the GDP, is just very effective between all three of these areas. So,
Okay, so for the 4 preferential trade agreements in Latin America, the first is the Central American Integration System, known as CICA. These countries include Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, and Panama. And the goal of these countries is to have free trade among each other, and they do this by lowering their tariffs, and they allow goods to be moved more accessible throughout the area. Similar to CICA, the Andean Community, which is the next trade agreement, and this can consist of Bolivia, Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru. These countries have the same thing in mind, where they're lowering tariffs on intra-group trade and making it easier for these countries to work together. The third preferential trade agreement is the Common Market of the South, and this consists of Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay. And then in this agreement, internal tariffs were eliminated, which allowed goods to be moved more freely throughout the member countries. But still, 90% of goods move freely, so there's 10% that still have disputes over tariffs on internal and external, but they're still reaching towards that goal of 100%. And the fourth trade agreement in South America is the Caribbean Community and the Common Market, also known as CARICOM. And this includes all the island countries such as Antigua, Barbuda, Bahamas, a lot of islands in the Caribbean, along with countries like Suriname and Guyana. But their objective is to achieve deepening strength of economic integration through the common market. These member countries had a customs union established with common external tariffs, which allowed trade to be more accessible and make it move more freely. And then in the Asian Pacific region, the first trade agreement was the Association of the Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN for short. It was established in 1967 by countries including Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, and Thailand. Admitted later included countries of Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar. Their top trading partners include Japan, the EU, China, and the United States. In January 2010, the formal establishment of New China, ASEAN, and the Free Trade Area was created, and this benefited some countries, but potentially could negatively impact others because of low wages and poor working conditions in developed countries compared to countries like Vietnam, where a lot of people live in poverty. But in this case, why does Singapore thrive in this trade agreement? It's because Singapore used to be a British colony, so they have ties to the West, and because of this, they kind of have efficient infrastructure. They have excellent training programs along with a 95% literacy rate. And because of this, they have the most engineers per capita, which makes it a very smart country. And then Singapore also accounts for 1/3 of U.S. trading activities. So they get a lot of income and generate a lot of economic growth through partnering with big countries such as the United States.
Okay, so in conclusion, we looked at 3.1 through 3.6 today. And 3.1 started off with the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, which we looked at the treaty between the nations to promote trade with members, and it was replaced by the WTO in 1995. And then we went on to 3.2, which was the World Trade Organization, where we examined the forum for trade negotiations among members, and the goal is to improve world trade at the end of the day. 3.3 was where we looked at 4 categories of preferential trade agreements. So we had the Free Trade Agreement, the FTA, Customs Union, Common Market, and Economic Union. And at 3.4, we assessed the trade relationship dynamics and NAFTA. And so this initially began with the CFTA between Canada and US, but then Mexico joined to create NAFTA and create a free trade agreement to benefit the North American economy. And then in 3.5, there were 4 preferential trade agreements in Latin America and the key members, which was the Central American Integration System, the Andean Community, the Common Market of the South, and the Caribbean Community and Common Market. And then finally, with 3.6, there are the preferential trade agreements in the Asia-Pacific region, which was specifically assessing the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Thank you.